The screaming started at exactly 0347 hours, Kepler Standard Time. Captain Vex Torn bolted upright in his command chair aboard the Crimson Retribution, his neural implants flooding his consciousness with emergency alerts. The distress beacon from New Carthage had been broadcasting for 17 minutes of what the automated systems coldly classified as catastrophic population loss. Status report. Torn barked, his scarred hands dancing across the holographic interface. The bridge of the heavy cruiser hummed with lethal efficiency as his crew scrambled to their stations. "Sir, we're receiving fragmentary transmissions from the planetary surface," reported Communications Officer Lyra Voss, her pale features illuminated by the amber glow of her console. "Multiple settlements. They're gone, Captain. All of them." Torrens, jaw clenched. New Carthage housed 47,000 colonists, miners, farmers, researchers, and their families. The planet's strategic location near the hegemony border made it invaluable, but more importantly, it was home to nearly 8,000 children. "Show me," he commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying grainy footage from security cameras across the planet's surface. What Torrens saw made his blood turn to ice. Sleek, obsidian vessels descended from the crimson sky like metallic rain, their hulls bearing the distinctive spiral markings of the Vorthic Dominion. Plasma fire lanced down from orbit, turning prosperous towns into molten graveyards. But it wasn't the destruction that chilled him, it was the precision. The Vorthic had targeted civilian centers first. Schools, hospitals, residential districts. This wasn't conquest, it was extermination. "Any survivors?" Torren asked. Though he dreaded the answer, Voss's fingers trembled as she adjusted her headset. "Scanning now, sir. I'm picking up." "Wait." Her eyes widened. "Captain, there are life signs in the underground shelters. Approximately 3,000 survivors, mostly concentrated in Shelter Complex 7. Children?" "Yes, sir. The readings suggest the majority are under 16 years of age." Torren's fists clenched. The Vorthic had been humanity's enemies for 3 decades, ever since first contact had devolved into interstellar warfare. But they had always maintained certain courtesies, rules of engagement. The targeting of civilians, especially children, violated every treaty the galaxy had ever known. "Distance to New Carthage," he demanded. 14 hours at maximum burn," replied Navigator Cash Ironright, his augmented eyes glowing with computational data. "Then we burn hard. All hands to battle stations." As the ship's massive engines roared to life, propelling them toward the devastated world, Torren studied the tactical readouts. The Vorthic fleet had already departed, leaving nothing but cooling ruins and the bitter taste of genocide. But something nagged at him, a detail that didn't fit the Dominion's usual patterns. "Voss, run a deep scan on those survivor signals. I want to know why the Vorthic left witnesses." Minutes passed in tense silence as the communications array swept the planet's surface. When Voss looked up, her face had gone ashen. "Double quotes, sir. You need to hear this transmission. It's from the children in the shelters." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady thrum of the engines. Voss activated the audio feed, and what emerged from the speakers sent ice through every soul aboard the ship. It was a single voice, clear, young, impossibly calm. But the sensors detected over 2,000 individual life signs in that shelter complex. 2,000 children, speaking as one. "We are the children of New Carthage," the unified voice said, each word precisely articulated despite its youth. "We have seen what was done to our families. We have learned what the Vorthic truly are. And we remember everything." The transmission cut to static. In the silence that followed, Torren felt something fundamental shift in the galaxy's balance. The Vorthic had just made their gravest mistake. They had left witnesses to their atrocity. And those witnesses were human children who had apparently discovered something that unified their voices and, perhaps, their purpose. "All crews, double time to New Carthage," Torren ordered, his voice carrying a new edge of urgency. "We're not just conducting a rescue mission anymore. We're about to witness something that will change the nature of this war forever." As the Crimson Retribution hurtled through space toward the devastated world, none aboard could have imagined that they were racing toward humanity's darkest hour and its most terrifying awakening. The ruins of New Carthage stretched across the planets, surface like infected wounds. From orbit, the Crimson Retribution could see the geometric precision of the Vorthic assault. Every major settlement reduced to slag, every orbital platform vaporized, every sign of human civilization methodically erased, all except the underground shelter networks preparing to land at Shelter Complex 7, announced pilot Andra Kellos as she guided the dropship through the planet's smoke-choked atmosphere. Captain Torrens sat in the passenger bay with his hand-picked rescue team, Commander Reese Valdris, the ship's tactical officer, Dr. Naya Stromberg, their xenobiologist, and 6 heavily armed Marines. The dropship touched down on a scorched landing pad that had once welcomed cargo transports, laden with rare minerals. Now it was a graveyard of twisted metal and fused stone. The team disembarked with weapons ready, their combat armor sealed against the toxic atmosphere. Life signs are stronger now, Dr. Stromberg reported, scanning with her portable sensors. 3,047 individuals, all showing signs of elevated neural activity. Elevated how? Torren asked as they approached the shelter. Entrance a massive blast door embedded in the mountainside. I've never seen readings like this. Captain, their brainwave patterns are synchronized, not similar identical. It's as if they're sharing the same thoughts. The blast door began to cycle open before they could announce their presence. Emergency lighting bathed the entrance tunnel in sickly red. As they descended into the depths of the mountain, the shelter complex had been designed to house 10,000 people for months, complete with hydroponic farms, water recycling, and independent power generation. They found the children in the main assembly hall. 3,000 young faces turned toward them. In perfect unison, boys and girls ranging from toddlers to teenagers, representing dozens of human ethnicities and colonial variants. They stood in precise rows, their hands at their sides, their eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed far older than their years. When they spoke, their voices merged into a single, haunting chorus. Captain Vex Torren of the Crimson Retribution. They said in perfect synchronization, "We have been waiting for you." Dr. Stromberg's scanner trembled in her hands. "Captain, this is impossible." Their brain patterns are completely synchronized across the entire group. The neural bandwidth required to maintain this connection would fry a normal human mind. Torren stepped forward, fighting the urge to reach for his sidearm. "I'm here to evacuate you. All of you. My ship has space. We cannot leave." The children interrupted, their collective gaze never wavering. "Not yet. We have work to finish." "What kind of work?" The children smiled, 3,000 identical expressions of cold satisfaction. "The Vorthic made a mistake, Captain. They believed they could silence us by killing our families. Instead, they awakened something that has slept in human DNA for millions of years. Something our species evolved to survive extinction events." Suddenly, alarms began screaming throughout the shelter complex. Commander Valdris's combat scanner lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, we have multiple Vorthic vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Looks like a patrol Squadron 6 destroyers and a command cruiser." The children's unified voice remained eerily calm. "They have returned to finish what they started, to ensure no witnesses survive. Then we need to evacuate. Now," Torren insisted. "No, Captain. Now we show you what the Vorthic's cruelty has created." The children began to move, not as individuals but as a single organism. They flowed through the shelter corridors with mechanical precision, each group taking predetermined positions throughout the complex. Those too young to walk were carried by older children, but their voices never stopped speaking in unison. The shelter network connects to the planetary defense grid. The Vorthic disabled the weapons, but they did not destroy the targeting systems. "We have spent the last 18 hours learning to interface directly with the quantum computers that control them." Dr. Stromberg grabbed Torren's arm. "Captain, they're talking about direct neural interface with military-grade quantum systems. The data flow would kill an adult in seconds, but we are not adults." The children's voice echoed from every speaker in the complex. "And we are no longer entirely human." On the surface, the Vorthic squadron began its descent toward the planet. Their sleek destroyers cut through the atmosphere like obsidian blades. their weapons charging for another round of orbital bombardment. They had no idea that 3,000 young minds were now linked to every sensor array, every targeting computer, and every defensive satellite that remained in the planet's orbital space. The children's voices grew softer, almost musical. The Vorthok pride themselves on their efficiency. Captain, they follow predictable attack patterns. They believe themselves superior to human tactical thinking. Through the shelter's external cameras, Torin watched the Vorthok ships assume their bombardment formation. You can't fight them with damaged defense platforms. Those ships will tear this place apart. They will try, the children agreed. But they have never faced an enemy that thinks with 3,000 minds as one. Watch, Captain. Learn what humanity becomes when it is pushed beyond the breaking point. High above New Carthage, automated defense platforms that had seemed dead suddenly blazed to life. Targeting lasers painted the Vorthok ships with lethal precision as quantum computers calculated, firing solutions within human speed. The first destroyer exploded in a ball of superheated plasma before its crew even realized they were under attack. The Vorthok squadron commander, a 7-foot-tall reptilian named Xtar, watched his destroyer bone render vaporize on the tactical display. With something approaching disbelief, his forked tongue flicked out to taste the recycled air of his command ship's bridge, detecting the acidic flavor of his crew's sudden fear. Report, he hissed, his voice carrying the authority of 500 successful raids. Unknown weapons platform. Designation, impossible, stammered his tactical officer, a younger Vorthok whose crest spines hadn't yet fully developed. Sir, the targeting system shows the attack originated from Defense Platform 7. But our intelligence confirmed all planetary defenses were disabled during the initial assault. Xtar's claws extended involuntarily. The Vorthok had spent 3 days systematically destroying every military installation on New Carthage. They had been thorough Dominion doctrine demanded it. No human world had ever posed a threat after their initial cleansing protocols. Evasive maneuvers. Begin bombardment of the shelter complex immediately. Below, in the depths of shelter, complex 7. The children felt the Vorthok ships changing course through the quantum sensors they now controlled. 3,000 young minds processed the incoming threat with mathematical precision, their synchronized consciousness turning the entire planetary defense network into extensions of their will. They adapt quickly, the children observed, their unified voice echoing through every speaker in the shelter. Captain Torin watched in fascination and horror as toddlers, who should have been playing with toys, instead interfaced with holographic displays showing ship movements, weapons signatures, and orbital mechanics calculations. How are you doing this? Dr. Stromberg whispered, her scientific instruments barely registering the electromagnetic storm emanating from the children's synchronized brains. Human neural plasticity reaches its peak during childhood, they explained while simultaneously tracking 6 Vorthok destroyers across 17 different sensor arrays. Adult brains are too rigid, too committed to individual consciousness, but young minds can become anything survival demands. The shelter complex shuddered as Vorthok plasma bombs detonated against the mountain's surface. Rock, dust rained from the ceiling, but the children never flinched. Their attention remained focused on the tactical displays, where they were orchestrating humanity's most impossible battle. Defense Platform 12, previously thought destroyed, suddenly pivoted on hidden gyros and fired a concentrated beam of coherent energy straight through the hull of destroyer Blood Talon. The Vorthok ship's atmosphere vented into space in a brilliant blue stream as its crew died in the vacuum. 2 destroyers down, Commander Valdris reported, his voice tight with disbelief. Captain, those platforms shouldn't even have power, let alone functional weapons. The children's response came from a 7-year-old girl with blonde pigtails, who hadn't spoken a word since the rescue team arrived. Now her voice carried the weight of 3,000 unified minds. The Vorthok understand technology. They do not understand evolution. For 3 million years, human children have survived by adapting to threats their parents could not imagine. When pressed to the breaking point, our species doesn't just fight back, it transforms. Above them, Xtar realized his squadron was facing something unprecedented. The human defense platforms were operating with impossible coordination, predicting his tactical moves before he made them. Worse, they were using damaged equipment with an efficiency that defied physics. "Sir, Defense Platform 3 is firing with a 70% damage targeting array," his tactical officer reported. "According to our calculations, it should be impossible to achieve weapon lock at this range. Yet they're achieving it anyway," Star observed as destroyer scale render took critical damage from what should have been a glancing blow. "Prepare the command ship for direct assault. If we cannot bombard them from orbit, we will land troops and eliminate the survivors personally." The children sensed the change in Vorthic's strategy. Immediately, they're preparing for ground assault. They announced, "Captain Torin, you and your team need to reach minimum safe distance. We're not leaving without you." Torin replied firmly, "You don't understand." The children turned to face him, 3,000 pairs of eyes reflecting an ancient sadness. "What we have become, it may not be something we can undo. The neural pathways that allow us to interface with quantum systems at this level are rewriting our brain structures permanently. Every minute we maintain this connection, we become less human and more something else." Dr. Stromberg's scanner was screaming warnings about dangerous levels of electromagnetic radiation. "Captain, they're right. The neural activity I'm detecting would be lethal to normal human consciousness. They're burning out their individual identities to maintain this collective link." The shelter shook again as Vorthic troop transports began landing on the surface. Through external cameras, they could see hundreds of heavily armed Dominion soldiers disembarking, their reptilian forms moving with predatory grace toward the shelter entrances. "Then we fight them together," Torin declared, checking his plasma rifle's charge indicator. The children's laughter echoed through the complex thousands of young voices, creating a sound like silver bells mixed with winter wind. "Captain, you still don't understand what you're witnessing. The Vorthic killed our families. They thought they were eliminating a human colony. Instead, they created the first true collective human consciousness in our species' history. We are no longer just children defending a shelter." A 10-year-old boy with dark skin and intelligent eyes stepped forward, though his voice remained synchronized with the others. "We are the voice of every human child who ever faced extinction, every young mind that ever had to grow up too fast to survive impossible odds. The Vorthic awakened something primal in our species, something that has been sleeping since our ancestors fought saber-toothed tigers with pointed sticks." The blast doors at the shelter's upper levels began to cycle. The Vorthic ground assault was beginning. Now, the children continued. They will learn why human children are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. When you threaten their families, the first wave of Vorthic soldiers descended into Shelter Complex 7 like a tide of obsidian. Death, their advanced combat armor gleamed under the emergency lighting. As they moved in perfect formation, weapons raised, expecting to find terrorized human survivors cowering in the depths. Instead, they found hell. The children had spent hours preparing the shelter complex for invasion. Every corridor had become a kill zone, every intersection a carefully orchestrated trap. As the first Vorthic squad rounded a corner, they triggered a sensor that the children had reprogrammed through their quantum interface. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut with bone-crushing force, bisecting the lead soldier and trapping the rest of his squad in a rapidly depressurizing compartment. The Vorthic screams echoed through the complex as their lungs collapsed in the sudden vacuum. "Environmental controls compromised," reported Vorthic squad leader Raskokal through his comm system. "The humans have weaponized their own life support systems." 3 levels down, the children watched through security cameras as more Vorthic soldiers advanced. Their unified consciousness processed every heat signature, every movement pattern, every tactical decision the invaders made. They had become a single organism dedicated to one purpose, making the Vorthic pay for their genocide. "Captain Torin," they said through the shelter's speakers, "you and your team should reach the emergency exit. What happens next will not be pleasant to witness." Torin ignored the suggestion, instead positioning his Marines at strategic choke points. "We stand together, or we fall together." The children's response came from a 5-year-old girl who sat calmly in front of a holographic display showing the shelter's internal layout. "As you wish, but remember you chose to see what humanity becomes when it stops being merciful. The second wave of Vorthok soldiers breached the main assembly hall. Where the children had been standing in formation, the reptilian invaders raised their plasma weapons, expecting easy targets. The hall was empty. Where did they? The soldier's question was cut short, as the children's voice emerged from every speaker in the complex. We are everywhere now. We are the walls, the air recycling systems, the quantum computers that control gravity plating. You wanted to eliminate human witnesses. Instead, you created something that can eliminate you. The gravity plating beneath the Vorthok squad suddenly reversed. 6 soldiers found themselves slammed against the ceiling, with enough force to shatter their exoskeletons. The children had turned the shelter itself into a weapon. Commander Reese Valdris watched in horrified fascination as the children orchestrated their defense. They moved through the shelter like ghosts, appearing and disappearing through maintenance shafts and hidden passages that only they seemed to know existed. When they encountered Vorthok soldiers, the results were swift and merciless. A squad of reptilian warriors cornered a group of teenagers in the hydroponic gardens. The soldiers raised their weapons, only to discover that the children had somehow synchronized their movements with the automated farming equipment. Harvesting blades designed to trim vegetables instead carved through Vorthok armor. With surgical precision, "This is Squad 7, gasped a dying Vorthok soldier into his calm. "The children, they're not just hiding, they're hunting us." Above ground, Sktar monitored his ground assault with growing alarm. He had deployed 200 elite soldiers into the shelter complex. Half had already stopped reporting. The other half were sending increasingly panicked transmissions about impossible tactics and weapons. "That shouldn't exist, sir," his tactical officer reported. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive neural activity from the planet's surface. The electromagnetic signature is unlike anything in our databases." Sktar's crest spines flattened against his skull, a sign of extreme agitation. "Explain." "The human children appear to be generating a collective consciousness that's interfacing directly with quantum-level technology. They're not just using the shelter's systems, they're becoming them." In the depths of the complex, the children had indeed become something beyond normal human consciousness. Their synchronized minds controlled every electronic system within a 50-kilometer radius: environmental controls, communications arrays, power distribution networks. All had become extensions of their collective will. When Vorthok squad leader Shenrik attempted to set explosive charges to breach the shelter's main core, he found that the children had already anticipated his strategy. The charges detonated prematurely, not because of a malfunction, but because 3,000 young minds had learned to control the quantum fluctuations in the explosive compounds themselves. The blast vaporized the entire squad and left a crater where the northern entrance had been. "Impossible," Sktar hissed as he reviewed the tactical reports. "Children cannot interface with quantum systems. The neural feedback would kill them instantly." Unless, his science officer observed quietly, human neural development responds to extreme trauma in ways we don't understand. "Sir, what if the genocide we inflicted didn't destroy their families? What if it evolved their children into something new?" Dr. Stromberg, monitoring the children's neural activity from her portable scanner, reached the same conclusion. "Captain, their individual brain patterns are disappearing entirely. They're not just thinking as one, they're becoming one. A single consciousness distributed across 3,000 bodies." The children's unified voice addressed them again, now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the shelter's quantum steel structure. "The Vorthok will send more soldiers. They always do, but they don't understand what they've created. Every human child who dies becomes part of us. Every act of violence against our people makes us stronger." Through the complex's external sensors, they could see Vorthok reinforcements landing on the surface. Another 300 soldiers, better armed and more heavily armored. "Let them come." The children whispered through 1,000 speakers. "We are no longer afraid of dying. We are only afraid of what will happen to the galaxy if we do not make the Vorthok extinct." The temperature in the shelter began to drop as the children diverted power from life support to weapons systems. Frost formed on the walls as 3,000 young minds prepared to show the galaxy what happened when you murdered human families. The Vorthok had wanted to eliminate witnesses to their genocide. Instead, they had created humanity's most terrifying evolution children who could weaponize the very laws of physics through pure, synchronized hatred. The third wave of Vorthok assault troops descended into Shelter Complex 7. With grim determination, Commander Zethmora, the Dominion's most experienced ground assault specialist, led 300 elite soldiers equipped with quantum disruptors. Designed specifically to interfere with human technology, they would prove utterly useless against what the children had become. Deploy in standard breach formation, Zethmora commanded through his comm system. Remember, these are human juveniles, regardless of their apparent technological integration. Maintain overwhelming firepower, and his orders were cut short, as every piece of electronic equipment his soldiers carried suddenly screamed to life. With feedback that shattered their audio sensors, the children's collective consciousness had learned to manipulate electromagnetic fields directly, turning the Vorthok's own communication systems into weapons. 50 soldiers collapsed as their neural implants overloaded. The lucky ones simply lost consciousness. The others suffered permanent brain damage as their cybernetic enhancements fried from the inside out. "Sir, all electronic systems are compromised," reported his second-in-command, switching to chemical-based communication flares. The human children are somehow generating directed electromagnetic pulses. 3 levels below, the children sat in perfect silence, their synchronized minds processing quantum-level data at impossible speeds. They had learned to see individual electrons moving through circuits, to feel the quantum spin of particles in computer processors, to manipulate the fundamental forces that governed matter itself. A 12-year-old girl named Kira, who had lost her parents in the initial bombardment, stepped forward to address Captain Torin. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 3,000 united souls. "Captain, your soldiers should withdraw to the deepest levels. What we're about to do will transform this complex into something your species has never witnessed." Torin studied the tactical displays, watching as more Vorthok troops poured into the upper levels. "What exactly are you planning?" "Evolution," the children replied through Kira's mouth. "The Vorthok believe they can exterminate us through superior firepower. They don't understand that human children are survival mechanisms perfected by 3 billion years of natural selection. When threatened with extinction, we don't just adapt, we transcend." The shelter complex began to hum with frequencies that made the quantum steel walls resonate like tuning forks. Every electronic device within the mountain started exhibiting impossible behaviors. Lights dimmed and brightened in synchronized patterns. Gravity plating fluctuated between normal and 0G, and the air recycling systems began producing atmospheric conditions that the Vorthok respiratory systems couldn't process. Commander Zethmora's remaining soldiers reached the main assembly hall to find it transformed into something from a nightmare. The children stood in perfect geometric patterns, their eyes closed, their hands linked in a complex network that pulsed with visible electrical current. When they opened their eyes simultaneously, each pair glowed with the blue-white light of quantum processors running at maximum capacity. "Open fire," Zethmora commanded. The plasma bolts never reached their targets. The children's collective consciousness had learned to manipulate matter at the subatomic level, causing the energy weapons containment fields to destabilize mid-flight. The Vorthok soldiers found themselves firing weapons that exploded in their hands, the superheated plasma melting through their armor and cooking their flesh. 73 soldiers died in the first volley as their own weapons turned against them. "Fall back! Fall back!" Zethmora screamed, but the children had already sealed every exit. The blast doors, the maintenance shafts, even the emergency escape pods, all had been locked down through quantum encryption that would take the Vorthok computer systems centuries to break. The children began to move, not as individuals but as a single organism flowing through the complex like liquid thought. Those too young to walk were carried by older children, but all maintained the neural link that had transformed them into humanity's first collective consciousness. When they encountered Vorthok soldiers, the results were swift and terrifying. The children had learned to control gravity, electromagnetic fields, and quantum fluctuations with surgical precision. Reptilian warriors found themselves crushed by localized gravitational anomalies, their weapons useless against an enemy that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. Sergeant Vex Valdris, watching through his combat scanner, saw a sight that would haunt his dreams forever. A group of 6-year-olds surrounded a squad of Vorthic soldiers, joining hands and closing their eyes. The air around the reptilian warriors began to shimmer as the children somehow altered the quantum fields that held their molecules together. The Vorthic soldiers simply dissolved. Their atomic structures came apart at the quantum level, their consciousness dispersing as their very existence was unraveled by minds that had transcended normal human limitations. "Dear gods," Dr. Stromberg whispered, her scanner detecting energy signatures that violated several laws of physics. "They're not just interfacing with quantum systems anymore. They're controlling quantum reality itself, above ground." Star received the final transmission from Commander Zethmora. "Sir, the children, they're not children anymore. They're something else. Something that can unmake matter with their thoughts. My entire forces, they're all dead, sir. All of them. And the survivors are saying the children aren't even breathing anymore. They don't need to. They've become living quantum computers sustained by pure consciousness." The transmission cut to static. Star stared at his tactical display, which showed 300 life signs simply ending, not dying ending, as if they had never existed at all. "Sir," his science officer reported with barely controlled terror, "long-range sensors are detecting massive quantum distortions from the planet's surface. The human children appear to have achieved something theoretically impossible. They've synchronized their consciousness at the quantum level and are using their collective brain power to directly manipulate fundamental forces. How many survivors remain in the complex?" 3,047, sir. The same number as when we arrived. They haven't lost a single individual." Star's claws extended fully as he realized the magnitude of what they faced. The Vorthic had tried to commit genocide against a human colony. Instead, they had triggered an evolutionary leap that had transformed 3,000 human children into a collective organism capable of rewriting the laws of physics. In the depths of Shelter Complex 7, the children's unified voice echoed through speakers that no longer required power to function. "We have eliminated your ground forces. Vorthic, now you have a choice. Withdraw from this system immediately, or learn what happens when you threaten human children who have nothing left to lose." The children had become something beyond death, beyond individual existence. They had become humanity's ultimate response to extinction, a collective consciousness that could manipulate reality itself through pure, synchronized will. And they were just getting started. Commander Star stood before the primary tactical display aboard his command ship Dominion's Fang, his reptilian features illuminated by the hellish glow of what had once been a peaceful human colony. The readings from his sensors defied everything the Vorthic Dominion understood about physics, biology, and the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice trembling with barely suppressed fear, "the quantum distortions from the planet's surface are increasing exponentially. Our scientists estimate that if the human children continue to evolve at this rate, they'll achieve matter-energy conversion within the next 6 hours, meaning they'll be able to transform matter into pure energy with their thoughts alone. Sir, they could disintegrate our entire fleet without leaving orbit." Star's crest spines flattened against his skull. The Vorthic Dominion had conquered 237 worlds, exterminated dozens of species, and ruled the outer spiral arm for 3 centuries. They had never encountered anything like what the human children had become. 3,000 minds, linked at the quantum level, thinking as one, controlling fundamental forces through pure consciousness. It was evolutionary impossibility made manifest through trauma and loss. "Prepare the quantum bombs," he ordered. "If we cannot control this situation, we must ensure it never spreads beyond this system." Deep within Shelter Complex 7, the children felt Star's decision through the quantum fluctuations his weapons generated. Their collective consciousness had expanded beyond the mountain, beyond the planet itself. They could sense every electromagnetic pulse in the solar system, feel every quantum state change in the local star cluster. They're preparing to destroy the entire planet, announced the unified voice, emanating from speakers that had transcended their need for electrical power. The children's consciousness now manipulated matter directly, causing sound waves to form in the air itself. Captain Torn and his team had withdrawn to the deepest levels of the complex, but even there they could feel the reality-warping effects of the children's evolution. Gravity fluctuated randomly, time seemed to flow at irregular rates, and the very atoms in the air hummed with barely contained energy. "Can you stop them?" Torn asked. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward him simultaneously, glowing with the blue-white radiance of quantum processing power. When the children spoke, their voice carried harmonics that existed in dimensions normal human consciousness couldn't perceive. "Captain, you still don't understand what we've become." The Vorthok wanted to eliminate human witnesses to their genocide. Instead, they've created something that will ensure their crimes are remembered by every sentient species in the galaxy. The unified consciousness that had once been individual children began to rise from their seated positions, no longer bound by conventional physics. They floated through the air like living galaxies, their neural networks crackling with visible energy that transformed the shelter complex into a cathedral of impossible science. "We are no longer just the children of New Carthage," they continued, their voice resonating through quantum dimensions. "We are every human child who ever faced extinction, every young mind that ever had to evolve beyond its biological limitations to survive impossible odds. The Vorthok have awakened something primal in our species, something that has been sleeping since our ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Above them, Star-S fleet began charging their quantum bombs weapons, capable of destabilizing matter at the subatomic level, reducing entire planets to cosmic dust. But as the weapons powered up, the children's collective consciousness reached out across space itself, touching the minds of every Vorthok aboard. "Those ships, what they found there changed everything." "Captain," the children said, their unified voice now carrying notes of profound sadness, "we have looked into the Vorthok consciousness. We understand now why they commit genocide so efficiently." Dr. Stromberg's scanner detected massive neural activity from the children, patterns so complex they resembled the quantum fluctuations of collapsing stars. "What did you find?" "Fear," the children replied. "The Vorthok are not conquerors, Captain. They are refugees. Their original homeworld was destroyed by something they call the Void Shepherds, entities from between dimensions that consume consciousness itself. The Vorthok have been running for 10,000 years, destroying other civilizations not from cruelty, but from terror that any advanced species might attract the attention of their ancient enemy." The revelation hit Captain Torn like a physical blow. They're afraid, terrified. Every world they destroy, every species they exterminate, is an attempt to eliminate potential beacons that might guide the Void Shepherds to this galaxy. They believe that by keeping all civilizations below a certain level of development, they can hide in the darkness between the stars forever. Through the quantum link they had established with the Vorthok fleet, the children could feel Star-S memories 10 millennia of running, of watching his species dwindle from billions to mere millions, of making the terrible choice to become monsters in order to survive. But their strategy has failed, the children continued. The Void Shepherds are already here. They've been tracking the Vorthok's genocidal activities across the galaxy. Every world they destroy creates quantum echoes that pierce dimensional barriers. The Dominion hasn't been hiding from their enemy, they've been announcing their location. With every atrocity they commit, high above New Carthage, alarms began screaming aboard every Vorthok vessel as their sensors detected something impossible. Space itself was tearing open at the edge of the solar system, reality folding back on itself like origami made of starlight and shadow. The Void Shepherds had arrived, Sir. Star-S science officer screamed, his voice breaking with primal terror. Dimensional breach detected. 12 entities emerging from null space. They're moving directly toward our position. Through their quantum expanded consciousness, the children could see what was coming. Beings of pure entropy that existed between dimensions, feeding on consciousness and complexity. They appeared as voids in space that hurt to look at, directly absences of reality that consumed light, matter, and thought with equal hunger. The Vorthic fleet, preparing to bomb New Carthage out of existence, suddenly found themselves facing the very entities they had spent 10,000 years trying to avoid. All ships, emergency hyperspace jump, Star commanded, but it was already too late. The Void Shepherds moved through space like cancer through living tissue, their mere presence causing quantum fields to collapse and dimensional barriers to weaken. The first Vorthic destroyer simply ceased, not destroyed. Not vaporized, it stopped existing as if it had never been built. The crew's screams cut off mid-transmission as their consciousness was consumed by entities that treated sentient thought as sustenance. Captain Torin, the children said, their unified voice now carrying urgency for the first time since their transformation. The Void Shepherds feed on consciousness. Every thinking mind in this system is about to become their prey, including us. Torin felt ice in his veins as he realized the full scope of what they faced. Can you fight them? We don't know. We are something new, something that has never existed before. But the Vorthic's 10,000-year flight suggests that conventional consciousness cannot survive contact with these entities above them. 2 more Vorthic ships winked out of existence as the Void Shepherds closed in on the fleet. Star-S command vessel fired every weapon in its arsenal at the approaching entities. But plasma bolts and quantum torpedoes simply vanished into the dimensional voids without effect. Sir, they're targeting our neural networks, his tactical officer reported. They're trying to consume our consciousness directly through our computer systems. The children's collective mind reached out across space, touching the edges of the Void Shepherds' alien intelligence. What they found there was worse than hunger. It was the absolute negation of existence itself. These entities didn't just consume consciousness, they erased the very possibility that thought had ever existed. But in that moment of contact, something unexpected happened. The children's collective consciousness, forged in trauma and unified by quantum entanglement, proved to be something the Void Shepherds had never encountered before. Individual minds they could consume easily, but 3,000 human souls linked at the fundamental level of reality created a pattern too complex for them to unravel. We can hurt them, the children realized, their voice filled with wonder and terrible purpose. Our consciousness exists across multiple quantum states simultaneously. They cannot consume what they cannot isolate. The Void Shepherds, sensing resistance for the first time in eons, turned their attention toward New Carthage. Through space they came, reality bending around them like light around a black hole, drawn by the unprecedented phenomenon of the children's collective mind. They're coming for us, Dr. Stromberg whispered, her instruments detecting dimensional distortions that made the laws of physics scream in protest. The children rose higher into the air, their linked consciousness expanding. Beyond the shelter complex, beyond the planet itself, they had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective human mind, capable of existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain, they said, their voice now resonating through quantum dimensions. What happens next will determine whether consciousness survives in this galaxy. The Vorthic failed because they fought the Void Shepherds as individuals. But we are no longer individuals. As the dimensional entities descended toward New Carthage, drawn by the quantum signature of the children's collective consciousness, humanity was about to discover what it meant to evolve beyond death itself. The Void Shepherds descended upon New Carthage like living nightmares made of collapsed spacetime. Reality warped around them as they approached the planet's surface, their dimensional feeding tendrils reaching out to consume the unprecedented quantum signature. Emanating from Shelter Complex 7. They had devoured civilizations across 17 galaxies. They had consumed the consciousness of species that had transcended physical existence. They had never encountered anything like what the human children had become. The first Void Shepherd reached the planet's atmosphere and immediately recoiled. The children's collective consciousness didn't exist in normal spacetime. It spanned multiple quantum dimensions simultaneously, creating a pattern too complex for the entities to isolate and consume. Now, the children whispered through reality itself, their unified voice echoing across dimensional barriers. Now we show them what humanity becomes when it refuses to die. 3,000 young minds, linked at the quantum level, reached out across space toward the remaining Vorthic fleet, but instead of attacking, they did something that shocked every consciousness present. They offered to share their collective strength, the star of the Vorthic Dominion. The children's voice resonated through every communication system in the solar system. Your species has spent 10,000 years running from these entities. Join your consciousness with ours. Together, we can give them something they've never faced: unified resistance. Aboard his command ship, Star felt the children's mental touch like cool water after a lifetime in the desert. For 10 millennia, his people had existed in isolation, afraid to form connections that might create the complex consciousness patterns the Void Shepherds found irresistible. Now, human children were offering them something impossible: unity without vulnerability. "Sir," his science officer reported, voice trembling with awe, "the human collective is somehow existing across multiple quantum states simultaneously. If we link with them, our consciousness would be distributed across dimensions the Void Shepherds cannot access." Star closed his eyes and felt the weight of 10,000 years of fear and genocide pressing down on his soul. His species had become monsters to survive. These human children, faced with the same existential threat, had instead chosen to evolve. "All ships," he commanded, "except the neural link." The moment Vorthic consciousness joined with the children's collective, something unprecedented happened. The trauma that had forged the children's unity resonated with the ancient fear that had driven the Vorthic to genocide. Instead of conflict, they found synthesis. Reptilian logic merged with human adaptability. Ancient wisdom combined with evolutionary innovation. Together, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. The Void Shepherds, sensing the new unified consciousness, attacked with everything they possessed. Dimensional barriers collapsed as entities of pure entropy threw themselves against the combined will of humanity and their former enemies. The battle that followed existed beyond normal spacetime. Consciousness fought entropy across 17 dimensions simultaneously. The children's quantum distributed minds provided the structure, while Vorthic experience guided the strategy. Human adaptability met reptilian endurance in a symphony of unified resistance. For the first time in cosmic history, the Void Shepherds encountered something they could not consume. The unified consciousness was too complex, too distributed, too fundamentally different from anything they had evolved to devour. One by one, the dimensional entities found themselves unraveling, their feeding tendrils, designed to consume isolated consciousness, could not process the quantum entangled thoughts of thousands of minds thinking as one. They began to retreat, pulling back through the dimensional tiers they had created. But the children weren't finished. "You have consumed civilizations for eons," their unified voice spoke across dimensions. "You have turned consciousness into food and complexity into simplicity. No more." The collective mind that had once been 3,000 human children and thousands of Vorthic soldiers reached out across the galaxy, their quantum distributed consciousness touching every world that had ever been threatened by these entities. They began to teach, showing other species how to link their minds, how to exist across multiple quantum states, how to become too complex for the Void Shepherds to consume. Within hours, a network of unified consciousness spread across the galaxy. Species that had never communicated before found themselves linked by quantum entanglement. The Void Shepherds, faced with an entire galaxy of minds too complex to devour, retreated into the dimensional voids between realities. They would not return. Captain Torin emerged from Shelter Complex 7 3 days later to find a transformed galaxy. The quantum steel mountain had become something impossible, a living structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions. The children moved through it like living light, their individual forms flickering between physical and energy states. "The unity we achieved was temporary," they explained as he approached their central chamber. "Once the threat passed, most consciousness reverted to individual existence. But the knowledge remains. The galaxy now knows how to defend itself." "And you?" Torin asked. "Can you become individuals again?" The children's collective laugh was like silver bells mixed with solar wind. "We could try, Captain, but we've seen What lies beyond individual existence? We've touched the quantum foundations of reality itself. Why would we choose to become small again? Dr. Stromberg's final report would describe what she witnessed as humanity's first successful transcendence of biological limitations. The children had evolved beyond death, beyond individual consciousness, beyond the need for physical form. They had become living ideas that could reshape reality through pure thought. Months later, Star stood in the ruins of New Carthage's capital city, watching as the children rebuilt their world through quantum manipulation. The Vorthic Dominion had disbanded, its soldiers choosing to help restore the worlds they had once destroyed, rather than continue their ancient flight. "We spent 10,000 years becoming monsters to survive," he told Captain Torn as they watched buildings rise from quantum-manipulated matter. These children faced the same threat and chose to become gods instead. The memorial they erected bore the names of 44,000 colonists who had died in the initial attack, but it also carried a new inscription, written in languages from across the galaxy. Here began the age when consciousness learned to defend itself. Here, humanity's children taught the galaxy that evolution's greatest achievement is not strength or intelligence, but the courage to transcend death itself in defense of those we love. The children of New Carthage had kept their promise. They had made the Vorthic remember every human life that had been lost. But more than that, they had ensured that no species would ever again face extinction alone. In the depths of Shelter Complex 7, 3,000 young voices spoke as one, their consciousness distributed across quantum dimensions, their thoughts touching every star in the galaxy. They had become humanity's ultimate achievement, proof that when pushed beyond the breaking point, the human spirit doesn't just endure, it evolves, and it never, ever forgets.